Hi, my name is Crystal, and I am presenting on poverty and its impact on families. So I started with some definitions. So according to Merriam-Webster, poverty is defined as the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. I also included some definitions of poor. I thought the wording was pretty interesting. Lacking material possessions, of relating to or characterized by poverty, less than adequate, meager, small in worth, inferior in quality or value, indifferent, unfavorable, lacking a normal or adequate supply of something specified. Also included definitions for the federal poverty level. That is a measure of income issued every year by the Department of Health and Human Services, used to determine your eligibility for certain programs and benefits, including Medicaid and the CHIP coverage. The 2021 federal poverty level income numbers, you can see what they are for a family of 2, 3, and 4. And then I included the federal poverty threshold. So deep poverty is less than 50%, poverty is less than 100%, and low income is less than 200%. So the scope of poverty. So the 2019, these are the 2019 census results. So the official poverty rate in 2019 was 10.5%, down 1.3% percentage points from 2018. In 2019, there was 34 million people in poverty. For all demographic groups, poverty rates in 2019 were either lower than or not statistically different from those in 2018. And between 2018 and 2019, poverty rates declined for all race and Hispanic origin groups. Now, I listed some effects of poverty, and I'll go into more detail in just a minute. So housing instability, food insecurity, chronic illness, mental health illness, toxic stress, academic hardships, unhealthy family functioning, increased involvement with child welfare systems and juvenile justice agencies, and just overall long-term negative impacts. So effects of poverty. So this is housing instability. So you can end up with inadequate housing, end up in homeless shelters or homeless. And poor housing can lead to unsafe places that increase the risk of injury or death to families. This can be caused by accidents, fires, drownings, poisonings, especially lead poisoning, and respiratory problems, including asthma, due to air pollution. Food insecurity. So unstable or crowded housing can increase food insecurity, can also lead to poor diets and malnutrition. A lot of families end up relying on food banks and churches, different shelters to help feed their families. They can often have long lines that you can see here. And a lot of times people feel ashamed to have to rely on them. Chronic illness, mental health issues, and toxic stress. So you can end up with lifelong physical and mental health issues, including infant death, acute infections, delays in cognitive behavior, cognitive development, behavior disorders, hypertension, heart disease, obesity, and a shorter life expectancy. And then toxic stress is defined as unrelenting stress caused by extreme poverty, neglect, or abuse, and can negatively affect early brain development and lead to long-term issues with learning, behavior, physical, and mental health. Poverty can also affect academics and family functioning. So children experiencing poverty are absent more often, have an underdeveloped cognitive function, lower verbal comprehension, shorter attention spans, have more aggression, hyperactivity, and behavior issues. Family functioning is affected by economic insecurity and can affect parental roles, leading to a lack of problem-solving skills, eroded family cohesion, lack of communication skills, and lack of social support. Effects of poverty can also be increased involvement with child welfare systems and juvenile justice systems. I'm actually going to quote Jeanette Vega from the article we had to read, The Crime of Parenting While Poor. She stated that 73% of all allegations made to ACS for child maltreatment was under the broad umbrella of neglect, which was just the everyday struggles of low-income families. I think she said it best when she said, it's not neglect, we're poor. This is poverty. And one root cause of mass incarceration is poverty. So research shows poverty can make a person more susceptible to being arrested, being charged with a harsher crime, and receiving a longer sentence. So here are some of the risk factors. Households without English speakers. So these are households with all members over age 14 who speak a non-English language and or not proficient in English. Large family, family with 4 or more kids. Low parental education, so parents who have no high school degree. Residential mobility, this is changing residency 1 or more times in the last 12 months. Being an unmarried parent, being a teen mother, or having an unemployed parent, no employment in the previous year. Now this comes from the National Center for Children in Poverty. They have a calculator where you can choose your state, age range, income level, and choose risk factors. So here are the results for Texas. I chose children under age 9 in deep poverty experiencing all of these risk factors. So there are 3,534,842 children under age 9 in Texas, and 10% of them live in deep poverty. So left to right, this is households without English speakers. 21% of children under age 9 in deep poverty are experiencing this risk factor, as opposed to 11% not in deep poverty. 31% for large families, as opposed to 16%. Low parental education, 33%, as opposed to 13%. Residential mobility, 24%, as opposed to 33%. No, sorry, 18%. Unmarried parent, 71%, as opposed to 33%. Teen mother, 8%, as opposed to 6%. And unemployed parent, 46%, as opposed to 8%. Now, the same website can also show multiple risks. So, again, children affected by multiple risk factors are more likely to experience negative outcomes, including trouble in school, cognitive and behavioral developmental problems, problems with family functioning, and maladaptive behaviors. So here you can see 46% of kids under age 9 in Texas have 1 to 2 risks, and 17% have 3 or more risks. Now, for historical development, I went back to early colonies just because I wanted to show the change in attitude and beliefs towards poverty. So the early colonies, so many colonists that came here were of moderate to poor means to begin with, and then often reached the shore sick. They then had to deal with hardships and were forced to often live in poverty. But as the colonies grew, they developed solidarity, which led to social responsibility for the poor. And at this time, the poor actually knew their rights and used them to meet their needs. So they had colonial poor laws. They assessed taxes and distributed aid. Private homes were used to house the poor at public expense. The poor were auctioned off and provided for by a family, and reduced taxes for doctors who were offering free care. Now, the American Revolution. So it is thought that widespread poverty was a contributing factor to the war. It seemed to be, in this time, it seemed to be a battle between religious beliefs and economic means. So it kind of brought about national unity. Private charity began due to the demand for assistance. There was just so many needy. A cooperative approach of private charity and public assistance began. The Great Awakening aided with the belief that helping the poor is a human responsibility. And the Enlightenment led to social reform and humanitarianism. Let's see, the Civil War. So the Civil War resulted in many wounded and disabled soldiers and families that, basically lost their the male breadwinner of the family. And poverty became more of a charity movement with the investigation of the poor and trying to make them self-sufficient. It did end with having the facts of poverty and the development of caseworkers. So it led to the Freedmen's Bureau. And so the government could provide for the poor on a wide scale. Basically, it's the first time that they were able to show that they could do that. Darwinism also came about. This saw the poor as unfit. Public authority, they relied on asylums, almshouses, and institutions. And then the organized charity movement led to scientific philanthropy and then to the social work profession. So the 19th century, so this was a settlement house movement. So settlement workers saw themselves as social reformers and wanted to eliminate the causes of need. So poverty was now trying to be prevented. And so it took a preventative approach leading to social and economic reform. They had fair standards for wages, hours, housing, public health programs, and public education. The National Urban League, which was the leading Black welfare agency, was established. But even so, most of the reform was for white males and really did not help the African Americans at all. So the Great Depression. So around 15 million workers lost their jobs. Middle class people were now the new poor. People were forced to see that poverty often resulted from social and economic factors, not just people's behaviors. So the New Deal was created, and it did set up a lot of agencies. So we had the Civilian Conservative Corps, which hired people to do reforestation and flood and fire control. Public Works Administration provided employment, especially in construction. National Youth Administration had part-time jobs for high school and college students. Works Projects Administration, jobs for artists, musicians, and scholars. Farm Security Administration aided farmers and migratory workers. U.S. Housing Authority provided low-interest loans to build public housing. Federal Emergency Relief Relief Act, yeah. So federal funds to aid states with unemployment. Civilian Works Administration. So people put people to work quickly with good wages. It was not a relief program. And this was actually the only program that had decent wages out of all of those. Social Security Act created pensions and public assistance, unemployment assistance for dependent children in single parent households and children with disabilities, Public Welfare Association. Now, most of the programs just benefited poor white people, leaving everyone else kind of on their own. So after World War II, it was seen as a time of prosperity. So the concern of poverty and social reform was pretty much ignored. New rules were passed on existing programs, denying benefits and relief. Though there were some new welfare programs that were enacted during this time. So that included the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, National School Lunch Program, Full Employment Act, Housing Act, School Milk Program, Vocational Rehabilitation Act, Aid to the Permanently and Totally Disabled. So then comes the war on poverty. So in 1964, 1/5 of the American people were poor, including half of the nation's African Americans. President Johnson started a war on poverty, which created programs we still have today, but it did not succeed in preventing poverty, and poverty just expanded. So he started the Job Corps, which was for school dropouts, Upward Bound, which encouraged children from the slums to go to college if they were bright, creation of the food stamp program, Medicaid and Medicare programs, and the Head Start program. Now, so President Nixon suspected welfare fraud and believed in individual responsibility. So even though he believed this, so he believed that the nation could work its way out of poverty. But even with those beliefs, he did pass many laws to help the permanently disabled, elderly, and the working poor, which he considered the deserving needy. He did enact the greatest extensions of the modern welfare system. So he did the Rehabilitation Act for the disabled, the Earned Income Tax Credit for dependent children, Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, which subsidized public service jobs, Social Service Amendments, $2.5 billion annually subsidized for social services, and COLA, the cost of living adjustments. Now, Ford restricted welfare funds. 2.5 million people dropped below the official poverty line while he was in office. Carter, though he cut the budgets of social programs, he suggested a new welfare system that focused on the problems of the labor market and not unemployment. The proposal was pronounced dead after Congress adjourned for a year. So he cut the budgets of many social programs, but he did propose the Better Jobs and Income Program to replace the nation's welfare program. So Reagan was next. I believe I'm almost out of time for this session though, so I will continue in my second video.